We're back from break, and we're going to have a presentation on the evaluation of our Swale liner program.
Good morning, almost afternoon, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council, and staff. I am Amy Eason. I'm the Executive Project Manager for Stormwater Public Works, and I'm here to present to you the evaluation of the Swale liner program. So I'm going to go over an agenda, kind of explain the purpose of me being here and talking about the background of the program. What services do we actually provide as it relates to Swale liner? What are those costs? How does that relate to drainage request? Is it needed? And then what happens if we actually remove the program, and what's the recommendation moving forward? So the purpose is basically twofold. You requested staff to look at this at the winter retreat when the master plan was presented to you, and you also asked staff to look at it again when the stormwater utility fees were presented to you back on the summer retreat in 2021. So a little bit of the history of the Swale liners, and that was one of the requests at those retreats, is that, as we all know, the city was incorporated in 1961. As part of General Development Corporation, big, large land purchase. But from 1961 to 1988, we didn't really have an effective public works department. We lacked some manpower and some equipment. GDC also prepared a stormwater master plan. As you all know, our stormwater system is comprised as an open system. It's major waterways. Then we have a secondary system with the drainage waterways with structures, and a tertiary system that's a network of swales and culverts. And it is an open system, does include our roadways, because in some of those bigger events, our roads may end up flooding, as we've seen in some of the hurricanes that had just recently occurred. We also have swales, canals, culverts, lakes and ponds, structures, pump stations, and as well as the curbing to actually convey the stormwater. But today we're going to concentrate on those swales. Those swales that we have 1,200 miles of swales that exist in the city, and we have 281 of those miles right now that have no liner, so only 23% of that, and 919 of those swales have swale liner in it, 77%. So this map kind of shows where that swale liner is in relationship to our major drainage basins, which we have 4 major drainage basins, along with the districts in which that swale liner is located. So I want to give some basics on swale construction, because I really want us to focus on the liner itself. Because regardless, we have to deal with the swales. It's our system. It provides conveyance. It provides capacity. But we want to concentrate on the swale liner itself. But in general, this is a cross-section of what we require today as part of the swale construction. And the first thing we have to do is establish an invert elevation, work our way back from where that outfall is. We cut the swale with proper side slopes and depth, as you see in this picture over here to the right. We then add a sand layer so we have some extra percolation. Then we install the swale liner. And then lastly, we sod it so that we don't have any erosion of the sediment. Again, concentrate on the installation of swale liner, because regardless, all those other steps have to occur when you're reworking or constructing a swale. So the liner practice was initially started in 1987 as a result of the water and sewer expansion in the West, and as part of a drainage rework program, because there was a lot of complaints about flooding in the roads, as well as when they were constructing the water and sewer, some of the swales, weren't coming back where they should be. And if you think about it, 1987 is about 20 years after Port St. Lucie was developed, right? It first started, which is about the right time to actually do something about your swales, because you have a lot of sediment. It's kind of coincidental that this happened at the same time. But at that time, the city did look at the swale program, and they thought that constructing swales was going to cost way too much money, that you're going to have to maintain it 3 to 4 years. And therefore, maybe we should put a swale liner in there so we don't have to maintain it so much. And that's why the city had adopted that practice back then. The city does supply 3 main swale liner services. The first one is new swale liner installation, the second, swale liner repair, and the third, swell liner maintenance. The first service, new swell liner installation, we grade the swell, install the liner, we put the sod in, but most of those installations are done by contractors with new home installation. The city actually supplies the swell liner, the plastic liner. It's a 12-inch pipe. It gets delivered to Thornhill, and we have staff that actually has to cut that pipe because the manufacturer won't cut the pipe for us anymore, and that staff usually does it during overtime hours. We also survey it, and then we also make sure any rework that has to happen upstream, downstream occurs during that time. Again, most of that's done by contractors for builders. We also have a standard operating procedure. The city distributes that swell liner to the contractors. They actually have a request. They go online, fill out the form. They notify us when they need the liner. We provide them the liner, the pegs that hold the liner in place. But what I want to note here is that we do have in our ordinance that actually states that all new construction shall include the installation or reinstallation of the swell liner as required by the permit. So we actually require the swell liner to be installed. So since 1988, this is kind of a graph of the swell liner installation throughout the years. As you can see, it's pretty linear. As growth occurs, you see some spikes. As you see some growth not occur, you see some flat lines, right? But pretty consistent growth. And this is a graph that kind of shows the installation, but it kind of takes it out from the city provided, what we actually build, versus the builder. And you can see the past 3 years, the builder, and actually a lot more since 2017, yeah, no, it is 1917. Or anyways, 2017, sorry, I'm getting confused. Anyways, the contractor has been installing a lot of it, and you can see there was a little decrease in the city, but our city staff was doing a lot with the land waste and the waste pro, so not a lot of city staff was doing the installation at the time. The price of swell liner has increased. If we think about it, it's currently right now at $2.13. And again, that's the pipe only, not the people who have to cut the pipe, just the pipe. And if we looked at the single family lots, typically frontage 80 to 220 feet, we're actually supplying about $170 to $460 per single family lot just for the pipe. We also provide swell liner repair. This process typically is we look at the swell liner. If it's not aligned, we send contractors out there, realign it, we pull it up, we put the liner down, we align it, we tie it down, and then we just blow the debris right off the liner. The contractor typically does this work as well. It's $16.13 per foot to actually do this. And this is basically the number comes from the Section 19 Swell Work program that you approved in February 2021, which was part of the Innovations project where we were thinking about how we can decrease our drainage request. That project was $2 million that council had approved for 28,000 feet. And if we were to look at that program holistically, it's about $41.67 a foot to actually do that, which includes grading the swell, any pipe rework, any grades, survey, everything. But if we only concentrate on the liner, the physical liner itself, that's about $774,000. That is 39% of that project was strictly swell liner. The last service that the city provides is swell liner maintenance. This maintenance is completed by our current contractors. We provide 6 swell lining cleanings a year. The homeowner is actually responsible for mowing and removing debris, but we do a supplemental cleaning to help our landowners. That includes edging the grass, removing the sediment, and blowing the clippings out. And if you've seen all of our swells out there, you see this little opening that's open because all we've been doing is just cleaning that swell liner. We also have in our code, as I mentioned, that the owners are responsible for cleaning out those swells, removing the silt, litter, and debris. The swell liner maintenance areas, there's two areas, Area 1A and B. And those contracts, we were working off the 2016, 2017 contracts. Back then, it was 1.6 million. Our most recent contracts are now 2.4 million. So we have experienced a $742,000 increase in swell maintenance alone. So if I was to summarize all the costs for the liner, and keep in mind, this is probably really conservative. There's probably more cost to this as we talk about city labor, how much that is, and reworking swells and such. If I was to look at new installation, and this is just based off the home growth that we have seen in the past 2 years, that'd be about $350,000. The repair, based off just Section 19 last year, was $774,000. And that does not include any small city maintenance repairs that we've done. And then the maintenance of the swell liner itself is about $2.4 million. So we're looking at $3.5 million just for the liner, which is about 10% of the stormwater budget. As you see, these are the drainage requests. I have plotted them with rainfall, so we know we get drainage requests when it rains. That's when people finally notice our swale system and our stormwater. But I've also taken out the requests that are strictly the swell liner cleaning and the repair as well. And you can see, sometimes it's a quarter of the request, sometimes a third, maybe not much of a request. And you can see that over the years here. But the main takeaway from this slide is when it rains, we get a lot of requests. The swell liner requests aren't as much as all the other requests, which are block swells, drainage inquiries, and such. And even looking into some of these swell liner cleaning requests, they're not quite exactly related to swell lining cleaning. It's just how they get coded. So is the system needed? I've done a lot of research. I've done a lot of work in the state of Florida. And I could find one city that was using it, and that's the city of Sebastian. And they stopped the program in 2016 because it cost too much. So that right now, there's currently no other municipalities that I know of that actually uses plastic liner for drainage. From an engineering standpoint, swell lining, ditch lining is basically for erosion. Not for conveyance, not for storage. It's just to help reduce the sediment erosion. And it's only needed when erosion occurs greater than like 2 feet per second. And plastic pipe is not in any engineer standard of using it for swell lining. But I also wanted to note that according to DOT, regular sod handles 4 feet per second. And our slopes for our swells are so shallow, we wouldn't even see that kind of velocity. So from an erosion standpoint, we really won't see erosion to where it would warrant having swell liners. Now, it may be dependent if some of our soils in the city are a little more not resistant to it. We could probably entertain something like that. But for the most part, you see them on I-95 when you see steep slopes coming off one of those bridges for the most part. So again, the one thing that the swell liner does, it does preserve the grade, because we're going from pipe to pipe and we're producing that plastic thing. So we're doing that, but is it necessary? Maybe, maybe not. But it does. That's one positive to it. We also are seeing a lot of more pollutants and sediment getting into our secondary and primary system because the swell liner, if you think about it, we get a majority of our storms are less than 2 inches. And if we have a lot of lawn debris and grass clippings and sediment because of just regular, everyday thing, that sediment's going straight into our main system. And if you haven't noticed, at the end of those big pipes into our drainage canals, you'll see little sandbars. And that's where all that is just coming out and collecting. So it's getting into our main system, which also is more maintenance for us. And also, it's not infiltrating into the ground. So if you had the grass clippings and sediment and you didn't have that swell liner, it would actually allow a lot of that to settle and it wouldn't come off the swell so fast. Another thing is in our public works beautification policy, we actually promote native vegetation in our drainage swales instead of using liner. So the benefits, the only benefit I, as an engineer, see is maintaining a grade. But the disadvantage is a decrease in water quality. As I mentioned, those lawn clippings are getting into our swale system as long as the sediment. The cost, it's 10% of our budget. And then you have a decrease in flow capacity. And I put this cross-section of the swale on because what we're seeing is right now, as you drive around the city, imagine this being your grass, and we're just cleaning out this 8.5-inch little area here. So if we weren't just concentrating on the swale liner and we were actually doing the rest of this black area, this is the flow capacity that we're losing. We're losing this flow capacity to get water off the lawns, off the roads, and we're losing that flow capacity from a treatment standpoint. If you were to remove the swale liner, which is this little quarter of a circle, you would then gain this much flow capacity from having almost a 1-foot bottom in the swale. So the swale liner itself is only like 8.5 inches, and then you're gaining a foot. And we could have our standard, once we really want to look into reworking this, we could even go up to 2 feet bottom, so we can get a little bit more capacity. But that may depend from section to section how things need to be graded. And then I wanted to share with council water quality. I actually did these calcs. South Florida Water Management District basically requires most developers at a minimum to provide 1 inch of water quality treatment over the entire area. Based off just the swale liner itself, we're not getting about 1/2 inch of that treatment because it's not hitting the ground. It's not going into the soil to be infiltrated. It's just being run off. And part of our goals, goal 5 in our strategic plan, is high quality infrastructure and facilities. So we really do want to improve that water quality. I share with you this graph to the side because the Florida Stormwater Association actually did a study on grass clippings. And they found that grass clippings had more fecal chloroform in it than dog feces going into, yeah, exactly. And also the sediment. It was really interesting how they did that. But with the other graph that I have to the side, what you see is, we are missing out on, we're missing out on that infiltration by having that swale liner. And I personally, last week, was driving around and noticed water in the swales, but it was because it was in the plastic liner and not in the swales that didn't have the plastic liner. Those were pretty dry. So what would happen if the swale liner system was removed? I feel that the city would incur minimal cost to remove the liner if we actually implemented it as part of a swale rework program. So I wouldn't even advise go out, rip it all out. I would say we need to have a systematic way of reworking our swales so that we could get the most benefit out of that system. We might also experience some increase in 1PSL calls because people are used to seeing the swale liner. And it's a change of life out here. So until we can really educate the public, and explain that change, then we'll start to see that the 1PSLs may go down. But initially, we may get more. So my recommendation to council would be to phase out the swale liner program. It's about $3.5 million. But in order to do that, we need to change the code because right now we are requiring people to put swale liner in. I would also recommend to cancel the swale liner maintenance and installation contracts that we have. I would also recommend that we don't order any swale liner materials. And then we only remove the liner when we do a swale rework program because at the time we go out there and rework the swales, the customer will see a benefit in what we're doing because we're going to add capacity and be able to add that infiltration. As an alternative, if phasing the swale liner program is not your cup of tea, we would recommend removing the maintenance program, which would be about $2.4 million. Because right now, there's no change in the code. The code actually requires the landowners to take care of their swells. After all this that I've said, no, regardless whatever happens here, we definitely need to continue the Rework program. You guys funded $2 million in February, and it needs to keep going. Our master plan actually identifies the need of it. We know that reworking the swales will remove that sediment buildup, and as I said before, maintenance for these swales, even with or without it, should be 5 to 20 years. And for your information, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection right now is changing the standards and the code or regulations to actually require municipalities to maintain their swales more often. So I'm concluding with that the swale liner doesn't provide a significant benefit. The swale liner program is expensive. The swale liner prevents water quality treatment from the smaller storms, the more frequent storms, which is very crucial to our environment. Property owners are responsible for cleaning their swales, and the city should discontinue the program and implement a rework program. So the path forward, should council give us direction, we would approve a recommended path forward. We'd have to come back to you for a resolution, of course, because we're just talking about the program. We'd have to also provide notice to the pipe vendor, cancel all future purchases of the liner, cancel the swale liner maintenance contracts. They're actually required 60 days notice. Prepare a draft ordinance change because it's in our ordinance. So in order for us to move forward, we'd have to change the ordinance. So we're thinking 3 months, up to 3 months for that. 3 to 9 months, we'd have to adopt the ordinance. Send notices to those property owners that have requested swale liner. According to our one PSL system, we have 356 new liner requests right now. And I'm being told by our drainage division that's about 4 years of backlog. Then I would, 9 months after, would evaluate the swale rework program, which is part of our master plan anyways. And as part of the direction when I did the CDD rebates, I was supposed to look at the program as a whole and bring back to you the entire cost so that we can do a rate study, a sufficient rate study that shows what we need to do for the future. And then, of course, regardless whether you guys get rid of the liner or not, a stormwater education program on maintenance and management should be given to the public so that they understand it. Because I know we're all conscious about water quality in the St. Lucie estuary, but to see or to be able to educate the residents on what they can do would be a benefit to us as a city. So I thank you, and I'll entertain any questions you may have.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. Comments, questions? You wanna wait? Go ahead, Steph. Councilman Morgan. You good? Go ahead, go.
I don't know. I'm good with this. I think you had me at, and it's not necessarily if we're the only one that's doing it, it's kind of like why, but you had me at water quality. And when it comes to the water quality, which I know is probably one of the biggest issues, it is going to be a learning curve education process, which has been and will always continue to be. It's always about education. I remember all the swale issues that we've had, and I think the requests are because they see neighbors have them, so they figure they have to have them. And let's face it, there's not a lot of the residents that do maintain their maintenance on the swale, except for the one at the corner of Rugby and Milner, best swale ever. And that's it. I'm good with this.
Councilman Pickett?
I've said this since forever. I think the swell program didn't work, hasn't worked, and still doesn't work. Yes, it moves water, but if you, for example, like my house, I have vacant lots on both sides of me. the water there drains where I have water sitting in my swell. So what's the reason why I have a swell liner? Why? It costs the city money. It costs us money to maintain it for something that's not working, and we're the only people in the state of Florida who do it. So why continue to do it? That's $3 million that we can put toward other things in public works. So for me, yeah, for me, I say get rid of it.
So when I first had my one-on-one about this, I had a mixture of emotion. On the one hand, I was elated, and on the other hand, I was perplexed. And the reason is, if you bring something to me that's going to save a significant amount of taxpayer dollars, it's going to improve our water quality, and the only barrier to that is that, as you say in your presentation, the use of swale liner system is not required from a drainage standpoint, but is driven by public expectation. If that's the biggest barrier, I'm very excited about that, because it's our responsibility as a city collectively to change those public expectations and communicate to them that we are reducing taxpayer expense, we're improving water quality, and this is a benefit. And I know that's especially important because every year, before I got on the council, and even last year I was on the council, we always talk about how much funding stormwater needs, and there's always a discussion about the stormwater fee. So I was very excited about that. I was perplexed because we're the only city in Florida still doing this. So, if something's so great, why are we still doing it when nobody else is? But I'm very excited about this. Very good work for bringing this forward. I couldn't support this any more strongly. Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
So agree with all the comments that were said. I don't want to repeat them. I think the challenge that is going to come forward is the call for 1 PSL for people that are used to seeing the swale liner. I think that one of the benefits that's being missed, and it's kind of a quiet benefit, right, is most of our citizens don't understand where their stormwater money goes. And a majority of it, like you highlighted, 90% goes to everything else but swale liners. But that 10% and seeing that swale in front of their house and that liner in front of their house gives us this perceived value of, well, oh, there's my stormwater money right there in front of me, right in front of my house. You know how we have the signs? Traffic, new road, this is where your money's going. So when you look at the front of your house, you see that liner, you're like, I get where my swale liner's going, or my stormwater dollars are going. So that's probably the only heartburn I have, is because it's an education piece. But I agree with the water quality piece. Like, I do want to save money. I think taxpayer money obviously is one of the top things to do whenever possible. But the water quality piece in the situation, as far as when we've talked about it on the dais in previous discussions, and using natural things to help filter out sediment and different types of nutrients is key. The one question I have is, there's empty lots, and there's always been a policy of the council not to address the empty lots until they're built on. And I know I've gotten over the years many calls from residents that water's holding in an empty lot and it's causing water to hold. What's staff thoughts on the potential of, since we'll eliminate this program, maybe building the connections between the empty lots and the current lots to ensure that we have an actual full swale system throughout the entire city, despite when they're going to build or not?
Correct. And that's my belief as well. The swales on empty lots, the empty lots are still paying a fee. The swale in front of them should be part of that fee because it's their stormwater fee. Not only is it serving them as an empty lot, they still pay for that. It's also serving the road right in front of it. So in my view, we should be making those connections. And as we start to look at the Swale Rework program and looking at empty lots, and I believe, prioritizing as we look at 1 PSLs and what are the causes of some of these, and if it's an empty lot, we should prioritize that.
So, council, that's kind of my thoughts is, when you are going to save money for the taxpayer, they're going to automatically say, okay, so what are you going to do with the money you're saving? I feel like it's important to show them a value immediately, and to me, the value would be, when you bring back the Swale Rework program, is the first thing on the list is us connecting, like we did with sidewalks, like we've done with other things, connecting all of the areas that need a proper swale system in the future, and I think that should be the first thing on the list.
Okay. So I agree, however, is there a barrier for us to charge different rates for the vacant lot, or do we just do that because it's
They've
not
been paying
improved?
for years. They've been paying for years. They probably should have had a swale to begin with, in my
Right.
view, yeah.
And then we should be paying, it should be the same assessment for everyone.
So our stormwater
If we're gonna be
fees-
putting in, if we're gonna embark on putting in swales for people, because right now, your builder's required to put your swale in. So that's part of what you have to pay as an impact to the system, right? They have to build the swale, that goes into the cost you pay for your home.
So our stormwater fees are based off impervious area.
Right. So that if we're gonna be putting it in instead, if that's what you're going for, then
But they've been paying
I-
for it.
so you should charge more.
They've been paying for it. They just haven't had the swale put in.
I get what you're saying, but so the fee should have been the same as when.
They should have.
That's what I'm-
No. So our fees are based off impervious. A built lot has more impervious area, which has more stormwater, which then therefore has to pay more than a lot that's undeveloped because there's no impervious area on it.
Ideally, that
Yeah,
fully pervious site would have very little runoff, very little.
Ideally, yeah.
Going to the system.
Daily.
Yeah, but as a sidebar, she is reevaluating our structure for determining fees.
Okay.
And it's a bit antiquated, I hate to say it, but it is, and that it assumes what percent impervious, do you recall?
What are fees? Oh, my goodness. A typical lot is like 2,200 square feet, which we are way more than that per lot. So definitely in doing the methodology for our stormwater fees, we will definitely have to up that and reevaluate that and look at how that's paying, which could potentially mean that people are going to pay a little bit more because they have more impervious area.
Well, we know this. All of us know this. We've looked at this rate study, twice now over the past, or at least twice over the past 2 years. And so we know that we're going to have to address it. So this is not something that's a shocker to anybody. And we actually used additional revenue last year in order to not increase it because of all the other increases that are happening. But we did talk about at one of the retreats that we're going to have to look at this and stop looking at it from a piecemeal situation. And if we're going to have to, unfortunately, increase because we have a over $131 million stormwater master plan that now this money, this little bit of 3.6 million can go to or into the rework, whatever. So we're going to have to address this. So
Yeah, and one of my charges has been to look at our system from a level of service standpoint, like how often do we actually mow and dredge and clean out our master system, and how often do we actually do the swale stuff, and all that has to be programmed out so you get an idea. And I think that's what you had asked me at the last retreat. What is the system as a whole going to do for the next 20 years?
right.
And then this new rules that are coming from DEP, they're requiring us to actually inspect all our infrastructure on a yearly basis, which could be more manpower that I'm going to need, as well as the maintenance of each of these infrastructures. So we're going to have to be able to provide proof that we're doing this.
Absolutely. But yeah, it's when I look at it now, and thank you because this has been a lot of work and I appreciate it. But this is an example of stuff that we've been doing for a long time that needed to be reevaluated to change because it's not working any longer. It's not to our benefit. So this is really a no-brainer for me. So for all the reasons that were already stated, and especially when learning about that, it affects our water quality when we focus so much on water quality here and have tried to been at the top of our game with regard to addressing water quality from what we can do as a city, but then how we're hampering it really by this system. It's time to make sure that we're doing it right.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I was recently at an LID Green Infrastructure Conference 3 weeks ago, and I was sitting next to Amanda Peck, who's with DEP, and I mentioned to her the Swale Liner program, and she was like, you're doing what? Because she couldn't quite understand it. So it's going to be something, if we start removing it, I'm going to ask DEP if there can be a credit to that. If we can get water quality credit towards our TMDL allocation, if we start removing some of that swell liner, and I did do the calcs, and they blessed my calcs, that can be an extra improvement to our allocation and our reductions.
Sure. Okay.
So education, Madam Mayor, is going to be key, but I do think this is going to be, so it's just like, it's not just like garbage, but in a way, it kind of is, in the sense that this is something that everybody sees. Every single resident sees this in front of their house. So I'm going to not only ask us to do a really strong education campaign, but as they're going around and removing the liner, I don't know if it's pre-removal, post-removal, during the removal, we might want to do some door knocking and really communicate as it's happening. Because yes, we can do emails. Yes, we can do Facebook. We can send flyers. But you said the 1 PSL calls are going to go up. They will go up, and they'll especially go up when they start seeing their swell liner come out, and then they're going to be, why is my... So we need to have people on the ground I would prefer pre-removal, just to make sure that that is being communicated, the benefits are being communicated, the education is being communicated, because people are not going to understand what's going on. And then there are going to be, I know this, I would have been, if it's me and I know nothing about Swale system and I see you taking away something in front of my house, I'm going to be pretty upset about it because I don't know anything about it.
Exactly.
Well, that's why it can't be just a piecemeal education thing. It has to be an actual program. And next year, starting with our city summit, right, our citizen summit, we can start talking about it and putting in our utility bills. We can do the door, everything. It has to be a holistic program that runs for a whole length of time on a regular basis, not just putting things out periodically on the way we do.
Yeah, and I
So-
could imagine that as we program the Rework program, that you'd have, similar with any project that we do, you would do a public outreach at the beginning of it. One thing I did note is, all the 1 PSLs we have right now that are open for new swell liners, I would recommend us to at least give them notice that we are not going to be providing that to them, and with a reason why, and kind of illustrate that. So that could be the initial step for our public education.
We should absolutely be doing that, because I could tell you now, the people that have been waiting already years are not gonna be happy. But you have to give the why.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely, and it has to be in there from the front side, from the beginning.
We discussed that. We're still ironing out the details of the plan. We discussed kind of prioritizing those that have been waiting 2-3 years for swell liner. Okay, we're not getting swell liner, but we're going to do the swell rework program still in those areas,
Right.
because it needs to be done anyway.
Right, exactly.
I would request that we maybe, like, our statement should be something about we're putting it on abatement or on hold because we still have an ordinance to do. We still have the program that we have to respond to. So until we get the ordinance even passed, we're putting it on hold while we're evaluating it further. I wouldn't want to say, absolutely not, just because we still have an ordinance to go through and we haven't voted through the ordinance yet. So even if we have consensus, I think that's important. And I'm thinking about, the empty lot too. That's the other reason why I think the empty lot is key. Because the minute we take the swell liner out, if there's water holding, and it's always been holding in that lot, it's only going to become, they took the swale liner out and now it's even
Now it's
worse.
flooding.
Yeah, we need to just finish the system. We just need to finish the system.
But we have to address the people who have been waiting
Of
for
course.
first, before we deal with the empty lots.
So in the Swale Rework program, in my vision and stuff, and this is great conversation for me to figure out what's priority and whatnot, because we not only have that going on, but we also have our culvert replacement program, which is in line with our repaving program and looking at where we're putting sidewalks. So all these elements need to come together so that we're more efficient in reworking the swells as well as the rest of the infrastructure that supports that.
And I don't want to say we're putting anything on hold. We're changing. We're changing the program. We have to start getting people used to changing. And the only way you do that is start in the beginning by being open and honest and saying, we're changing. We're looking to change this. We're moving forward this way. If you say hold, then it makes it seem like it's up in the air. But we're here, 5 of us, from a consensus standpoint saying, yes, this isn't working anymore. This needs to be changed. So I don't want to give any false notions that it may or may not happen, because it's happening.
No, and it's not that. I'm just concerned of how much detail we put out there until we pass the ordinance. because here's the thing.
Formality.
It might be a formality, but if something changes as far as a discussion, we get feedback from the residents based on this conversation on certain elements. I don't want to do what's happened in the past, unfortunately, where we put out, here's how we're going to do this. Oh, but wait, we're not going to do trash cans this way. We're going to do it this way. So I want to make sure that whatever message we put out is clear, concise, consistent, and doesn't change from today until tomorrow. And so, for me, I understand you think it's a technicality, but
So here's the difference. There's policy, and then there's getting into the details. And we have to stick to the policy portion of it from the broad perspective and not get into the details.
thank you. That's what I'm concerned with.
Right, so, but we need to stay out of all the little details, and I don't want to get into that at all. We should be, from a policy perspective, this is it. We're changing this. This is it's gonna look like, it's not a whole thing, and all the details could change later on from time to time. That's gonna happen because everything's an evolution, everything's a process. We're not beholding ourselves to every little detail, so.
Mayor, I think it'd be very easy to provide updates along the way, because we got to do resolution, we got to do ordinance.
Yep.
You know, we got several steps, so each time we come forward, we can say, okay, this is our refined plan, this is the details we have now
Exactly.
added. Yeah, each time we make that next step, this is where we're at.
Do you have something?
I mean, here's the bottom line on this. This is good policy, saves taxpayer dollars, it improves water quality. And the fact is, this is something I'm going to be talking about a lot. I know all of us are going to be talking about a lot. And if by the time this process, as you've outlined, is completed, if residents are upset about this, it's because we haven't communicated well. But we should support good policy.
Right.
And it's our job to communicate and communicate well. So let's support this policy and then just know we have to communicate on this and on every other thing that we do in the city.
All right, so is there a motion to discontinue the Swale liner program and move forward with a Swale rework program?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a great presentation.
Thank you.